Japan in the winter. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Kerry mentioned, my name is Paul Stanbury. I work with Kerry in the Naturetrek office. I look after a range of different tours from sub-Saharan Africa, cruises, obviously Japan, some trips to South America as well. Been with Naturetrek over 25 years now, and occasionally get out to lead some tours as well, to get to do the fun bits as well as the interesting office work. So I'm going to be talking tonight on our Japan trip, our Wild Japan in winter holiday, and for both the keen naturalist and also for the keen photographer, this really is a fantastic holiday that offers some wonderful landscapes, some really interesting culture, great food, and of course some fabulous wildlife as well. So a brief overview here, a map of our main sites that we visit on the trip. We run these tours in January and February, the 12-day holidays with the option of doing an extension at the end. In the middle of the winter, we're going there for at that time for a specific reason, of course, to see the red-crowned cranes up in Hokkaido and the wintering Steller sea eagles and the snow monkeys as well. So we start in Tokyo, down on the main island, Japanese island of Honshu. Then we move up to the northern island of Hokkaido, and that's where we're looking for the cranes and the eagles and Black-Instance fish owl and some other really lovely wildlife. And then we move back down to Honshu again and take the bullet train over to Nagano, and here we go up into the mountains to enjoy look for the snow monkeys, Japanese macaques that bathe in the hot springs in the mountains. And then there's the option to extend the holiday down to the southern island, the western island of Kyushu, to look for the other wintering cranes down there and a range of other wildlife. So we start, of course, with a flight out to Tokyo. On this tour, we really are immersing ourselves in Japan's unique culture and traditions, as well as the wildlife, staying in traditional Japanese inns, the opportunity to bathe in natural hot water springs called onsens, and sampling the delicious Japanese food that's on offer. But the trip will start with a flight, and we land in Tokyo. As you come in, if the weather's good, you might get a view of the snow-capped volcanic cone of Mount Fuji, the highest mountain in Japan at nearly 4,000 meters. But you will come in over Tokyo and get this incredible view of the city stretching out below you, and the population in Tokyo itself of 14 million people. But if you take the greater Tokyo area, then the population is 37 million, one of the most densely populated urban area in the world. But we fly into Haneda Airport, and then we have a night in Tokyo to relax after the flight and just to have a little look around the city. So the city is an interesting place to explore. As you would imagine, in Japan, it has the most amazing public transport network. So it's very easy to get around the city. We'll take you to a little wildlife reserve called Kazurinkai Park, where you're going to see some interesting eastern birds. And there'll be also the opportunity during the course of the holiday to visit the temple as well in the middle of the city. Here there's a moat around the edge of the Imperial Palace is its name. So the Imperial Palace, and there's a moat around the edge of the palace, which in the winter is full of ducks, some familiar ones like widgeon and mallards, and some less familiar species such as eastern spot-billed duck and the beautiful falcated duck, one of the most attractive of duck species, with this beautiful iridescent green head and the long tertial feathers drooping over the wing. as well as the ducks around the wooded areas and the parkland around the Imperial Palace. We'll be seeing plenty of dusky thrushes, and the dusky thrush is the common species of thrush out in Japan in the winter time. There's the lovely little varied tit. There's also Dorian redstarts, bull-headed shrike. So it's just a nice introduction to some Japanese wildlife while we're just relaxing after the long flight. Then the following day, we fly north up to the northern island of Hokkaido. Unlike more temperate climate of Tokyo, which is quite similar to the UK in many ways. In the winter, they have their damper wet days, they have their cold periods. But Hokkaido is much further north and it's much, much colder than down in Tokyo, typically snow-covered at the time of year that we visit. So we fly into the town of Kushiro, then we move north up through Tsuruuri, a bit of a mouthful, Tsuruuri, where the Japanese cranes reside. We have a couple of nights at Kauai, just to the north, and then we move across to Roadshow on the Shiratoko Peninsula, where we're looking for the Steller sea eagles and some of the other fantastic wildlife of the region. So we have 5 nights in Hokkaido altogether before traveling back down to Honshu. I'd say one of the great things about this tour is the opportunity to experience some Japanese culture as well as the wildlife. So when you're up in Hokkaido, we're staying in the traditional Japanese guest houses called a ryokan. And this is quite a typical room. I would set up when you arrive. Then you'll go and have your dinner, again, a delicious traditional Japanese dinner. And you come back and the staff at the hotel would have set up your bed for you. It's actually very comfortable. It looks a little Spartan, but it's actually, I found, very comfortable. The futon's very comfortable to sleep on. And the hotels up here have their own, a lot of them have their own hot springs, as well known as onsens, where you can relax after a day out in the field. And as I mentioned earlier, they serve very Japanese traditional food. Well, they're not quite so traditional, but one of my favourites of the trip up there was the strawberry and cream sandwiches, which I've never seen anywhere else in the world. So as well as sampling the traditional food, I'd recommend you try one of these for lunch. But then up in Hokkaido, the scenery is spectacular. Kauai is located in the heart of the Akan National Park, about 100 kilometers north of Kushiro. It's a park that covers over 905 square kilometers of mountains and volcanoes, birch, scrub and forest, dotted with spectacular crater lakes like this one. This is Lake Mashu, collapsed volcanic caldera that collapsed about 32,000 years ago. Spectacular site. We'll also visit Lake Kusaro, which is frozen for the majority of the winter, but there are some warm water springs around the edge which melt areas and attract in hooper swans. And it's we'd normally arrive at the lake close to sunset, and so it's a spectacular sight to watch the sun setting behind these snow-covered mountains with the trumpeting swans in the foreground. These swans are so confiding that you can get within a couple of meters of them, and so again wonderful for the keen photographers in the group. And there's a few other birds still around in the forest in the wintertime. A lot of the breeding birds, of course, have left to warmer climates, but the lovely little long-tailed tit of the white-headed race occurs quite commonly here. There are some familiar birds actually to us in the UK, some nuthatches, marsh tits, as well as a few less familiar species like brown-eared bulbul. One of the main highlights of a trip up to Hokkaido, of course, in the winter, is the Japanese or red-crowned crane, and they gather here in the winter. and to take advantage of the grain that some of the farmers put out. These are huge birds that stand over 1.5 meters tall, with a wingspan of 2.5 meters. It's thought that they were hunted to extinction back in the early 20th. So they thought they were extinct in Japan in the early 20th century. They were so heavily hunted. But in 1926, a group of about 20 cranes were found in the marshlands to the north of Kushiro, and they were protected, they were nurtured, and there are now nearly 1,000 birds. So we'll take you to a couple of there's two main feeding sites, to Ito and to Surumidai. And every day, so farmers put out some grain for the food for the cranes, and they fly in, eat grain, and then they disperse out to the fields for the rest of the day. And you can watch these wonderful birds trumpeting to each other and displaying, again, very confiding. Within some of the birds may walk to within 10, 15, 20 meters of you. So fabulous for photography, especially with this snowy background and wonderful light. And then in the morning, on one of the mornings, we'll drag you out of bed at first light. And so to get down to the Ottawa Bridge over the Setsugawa River, as the light starts to come up and as the sun comes up, and if it's been a very cold night, you get this wonderful hoarfrost on the river. And one of the most iconic sights of a trip to Hokkaido, the red crown cranes out in the Setsugawa River, all surrounded and covered in hoarfrost. And there's about 100 or so cranes regularly spend the night in the river, and we'll take you down to see them. There's also swans. You sometimes see eagles as well at this spot. And after spending the morning, spending a couple of hours just watching the sunrise and the light change over this amazing scene, we'll go to Surumidai to Surumi Ito Crane Sanctuary in time for the morning feed. You'll get your last dose of the red crown cranes dancing and trumpeting and displaying to each other. And then we move over to the coast, to Rausu. This little fishing town is on the edge of the Shirotoko National Park, overlooking the Sea of Okhotsk. And it's home to the highest concentrations of wintering Steller sea eagles in the world. The fishing village as well, along this whole coast, there's the whole coast is dotted with different fishing villages, each of which have long-tailed ducks and scoter and harlequin ducks in the harbour. Whilst out to sea, you might see spectacled guillemot and maybe ancient murrelet. But the main reason for coming here, as I mentioned, are the spectacular congregations of Steller sea eagles and white-tailed eagles as well. So there's only about 4,500 Steller sea eagles in the world, but a quarter of these winter along the coastline of the Shirotoko Peninsula. And it's a common sight. As soon as you get down to the coast, you see groups of Stellers and white-tailed eagles sat up in the trees, or others perched menacingly on the top of lampposts, like the gulls over here, and it's, get really close to them. So again, spectacular for photography. There are the eagles that hang out around the harbour, but we'll also take you on a couple of boat trips. You don't actually have to go very far from the harbour to get great views of these birds. If the ice has come down towards Rausu at the time of the visit, then we'll take the boat out into the ice and you can see the eagles sat out on the ice. If the ice hasn't come down that far, and it varies from year to year, then the boat just goes out of the harbour and goes along the edge of the harbour wall, and you get eye to eye with these spectacular birds. One of the largest and certainly one of the most majestic birds of prey in the world. So just spectacular photographic opportunities. All these photos of the eagles and the cranes I took myself on a trip to Japan a couple of years ago, and I'm by no means a good photographer, a fairly standard camera, standard lens, but the birds, the key birds, are close and obliging. On the boat, they'll throw fish overboard, as they do up in Scotland with the white-tailed eagles. Well, up in Hokkaido, they'll throw the fish overboard, and you get these stellas coming down and scooping the fish right from the side of the boat, eye to eye, point blank range. And as well as the stellas, the white-tailed eagles do the same. The white-tails are really small. These are massive birds. So of course, in the UK, we think of them as barn doors when they fly over. But in up in Hokkaido, where they're sitting next to Steller's eagles, they are dwarfed. On the trip I was on, we never got out to the pack of ice. It hadn't come down that particular winter, but we counted nearly 100 eagles all lined up on the wall at Raosu. And you can see from this photo that you get incredibly close to them. They just moor the boat up along the side of the seawall, and you are literally eye to eye with these amazing birds. Another photo here just to illustrate the size difference between Steller's eagle and white-tailed eagles. And we think of white-tails as being massive birds, and they are of course massive, but Steller's eagle, absolutely, just a spectacular bird. And so just great for anybody with a keen interest in photographs. You can just get the most amazing photos of these incredible birds. And they breed up in north. They only winter down in Hokkaido. They move further north up into the Russian Far East and Kamchatka to nest. But along the coast here, as I mentioned before, as well as looking at the eagles, we'll stop at various harbours and bays and look for the sea duck and other wintering birds. Plenty of long-tailed duck, and the spectacular harlequin duck as well is quite common along the coastline here. And then after we looked for the eagles and we've done a bit of bird watching along the coast, in the evening we'll visit a hide just to the north of Raosu, overlooking a little stream where a lady actually puts out fish for the Blakiston's fish owl, one of the largest, perhaps even the largest owl in the world, and one of the rarest. Has a global population of only 1,000 to 1,500 individuals, and perhaps there may only be 20 pairs in the whole of Japan. They're a spectacular bird. The hide is heated. More of somebody's, it's like more of a house really than a hide, and the area where the owls feed is floodlit as well. So we go there in the evening, and then we normally wait hopefully as long as it takes for an owl to come down. It's, you don't get them every evening, but it's quite reliable. But we appreciate this is one of the key species people want to see. So there are two shots getting Blakiston's fish owl. So up in Raosu, and then for the final night, we stay at a really nice guest house called Daiichi Onsen, just outside a town called Uroushi. And here again, they put fish out in a little pond for the owl, and it comes down and often sits outside of the dining room window. Spectacular bird to look for there. But as outside the window in the daytime, they have feeders. Red foxes sometimes come down to the feeders, but there's also some really interesting birds: hawfinch, Japanese picnic woodpecker, brown dipper, crested kingfisher. And if you're really lucky, although they don't come down to the feeders, in the little stream just in front, they very occasionally get the very rare and elusive solitary snipe. And also, if you're very fortunate, maybe even Japanese sable. The year I went on this trip, the sable were regularly coming down to the feeders at the onsen. I understand last couple of years ago, they stopped coming down. Of course, I don't know what's happened over the past couple of years because we've not been able to run trips there. And then after our stay on Hokkaido, we fly back down to Tokyo, and from there we hop on a bullet train and take the 90-minute journey at 300 kilometers per hour to Nagano, a city on the to the west of Tokyo, near the mountainous spine of Japan. And here we go up into the hills to the Jigogadani, or the Jigogadani Monkey Park, which is also known as Hell Valley. And it's here where you see the Japanese macaques bathing in the hot water, warm water springs. So these are the most northerly all the non-human primates, very, very thick fur, adapted to the very cold winters up in the hills here. But of course, apes are very resourceful creatures, and they take advantage of the warm water to relax and warm up during the winter months. They only tend to go into the spring, and the spring here is actually a man-made spring. It's not a natural spring. They used to apparently, I think, go down to one of the thermal springs in a nearby hotel and get into the water there. Of course, they didn't want them down there, so they built this man-made spring a bit further up the river. Well, they only tend to go there when it's very cold. If it's below freezing, then they will go into the water to relax. Actually, if it's slightly milder, then they tend to be mostly ferreting around on the edge. But it's spectacular to see them. Lovely to see them doing their thing, and very sort of one of the highlights of a trip to Japan. And we'll also visit, while we're in the area, visit the Zenkoji temples, one of the most important Buddhist temples in Japan. There's been a temple here since the 7th century. So which show you a little bit more of the culture as well as the wildlife. But if you want a bit of wildlife as well, in the grounds of the temple, there are often Japanese grosbeaks, bramblings, and other birds. And then we finished the tour with a trip out to Karazawa, and we explore some of the forests of Karazawa in the mountains, about an hour or so from Nagano. And this is a great area for bird watching in the winter time. And we're hoping to see Japanese waxwing feed on the mistletoe in the forest. But as well as the waxwings, we're looking for some other interesting birds: meadow bunting, Japanese accentum, which looks very much like a dunnock, Japanese green woodpecker, long-tailed rosefinch. If we're very lucky, even copper pheasant, which do occur up in these forests, but are very elusive and difficult to see. I think we've had one group to date that have found copper pheasant, but there's always that possibility. So that's the main tour, and then from there we drive back to Tokyo and we fly home. But if you want to extend the trip, then recommend going down to the southern island of Kyushu. And in particular, and this is the main reason for going down here, is to look for the other crane species that winter in Japan. We fly into Kumamoto, we explore the estuaries around Yachishiro, and then we go down to Izumi, where the main crane feeding ground is in the winter. And we fly out of Kagoshima on the way, and then back to Tokyo and home. It's a much milder climate down here, so much milder than up further north, and a lot more wintering birds congregate on this island. So the main reason for going here is to go down to the crane centre at Izumi. We get down here in the morning, and as up in Hokkaido, they feed the cranes at the crane centre. So we stand on the top of the building and watch skein after skein, flock after flock of cranes coming in first thing in the morning. And there are over 15,000 hooded cranes winter in this area each year, as well as 2,000-3,000 white-naped cranes and a sprinkling of other species: sand-tailed crane, a few common cranes, and if you're very lucky, even Siberian white crane on occasion. And so from the top of the centre, you just get fabulous views of flocks upon flocks of cranes flying over. These are hooded cranes here, and the larger white-naped crane as well. And as long as it is that much milder down in Kyushu, there's a lot more wintering birds. This is a small flock for part of a large flock of brambling and oriental greenfinches and various other species mixed in amongst them. You might see blue rock thrush here, the rufous-bellied variety. We'll go up into the hills as well and explore the woodlands around the reservoir, where you're going to see, hopefully, genuine wild mandarin ducks. And there are crested kingfish stuff here as well. Interesting variety of birds in the woodland, and hopefully red-flanked bluetail, which winter in fairly decent numbers in this particular area. So the Kagoshima or Kyushu extension is 3 nights with an additional night up in Tokyo, and we run it on some trips. We run it before the main tour, on others we run it afterwards. But that option is always there. And all of our Japanese trips, as I should mention, are led by UK tour leaders and also by local guides as well. So I will end here with a nice sunset shot. And thank you very much for listening. I will now pass over to Kerry